13 years after Robin Gibb passed away, something his family once guarded with fierce silence is finally starting to surface.
In retrospect, do you think it was good for the family dynamic, all your relationships with parents, brothers, everything, that the Bee Gees had such remarkable success and became such public figures?
Yes, I do. It's what you dream about. I don't know anything else, and I don't think I would do anything any differently. I love music. I'm working with the Royal Philharmonic with my son at the moment, RJ, on the Titanic Requiem, which is for 2012.
Not the fame, not the chart-topping success, but the private battles no one ever heard him talk about. For years, his children protected what they knew. They let the world keep guessing. They let the headlines stay shallow. But time has a way of pressing on the truth, especially when the weight of it becomes too heavy to carry alone. Now they are no longer shielding the man behind the music, they are explaining him. And to understand how the legend fractured, you have to go all the way back to the very beginning, before the rumors, before the scandals, before the spotlight. Long before the rumors, the headlines, or the quiet controversies, Robin Hugh Gibb was simply a child, born on December 22, 1949, at the Jane Crookall maternity home on the Isle of Man. He arrived into the world just 35 minutes before his fraternal twin, Maurice Gibb, a detail that would quietly shape their lifelong bond. Together, they were raised by parents who were loving, musical, and perpetually on the move. Hugh and Barbara Gibb didn't just encourage creativity, they lived it. Restless and ambitious, they uprooted their young family from the Isle of Man to Manchester and later across the globe to Redcliffe, Australia, chasing opportunity and possibility. Those early years were anything but calm. The Gibb boys became known for mischief that bordered on chaos. Small fires sparked out of curiosity, pranks pulled without thinking of consequences, and childish stunts that left adults anxious and exasperated. Yet beneath the troublemaking was something else entirely, a restless energy, a fierce imagination, a creativity that couldn't be contained by classrooms or rules. What worried parents and teachers would later astonish the world. Music was always there, woven into daily life, offering both refuge and release. In between moves and moments of instability, the brothers found harmony, literally and figuratively. The same intensity that fueled their antics began to shape their sound, their ambition, and their identity. It was the beginning of a fractured legend, one built on brilliance and tension, closeness and conflict. Today, as those closest to Robin finally begin to speak, a fuller picture comes into focus, not just of a global icon, but of a boy shaped by motion, mischief, and music. A man whose private battles were real, heavy, and deeply human, and a legacy that, at last, is being told with the depth and honesty it deserves. Before the world ever knew their name, three restless brothers stumbled onto a sound that would quietly rewrite pop history, and it happened almost by accident. In the mid-1950s, Gibb brothers, Barry, Robin, and Maurice, stumbled upon the one force powerful enough to tame their boundless energy: harmony. Sitting close together, almost instinctively, they tried to mirror the sounds they admired most, studying the smooth blend of Everly Brothers and the youthful sincerity of Paul Anka. Without realizing it, they were already shaping the tightly layered vocal style that would one day define an era. By 1955, that raw passion had a name. The brothers formed a group called the Rattlesnakes, taking the stage at Manchester Halls with an intensity that felt far bigger than their age. Audiences didn't quite know what they were witnessing, but they knew it was different. When two members drifted away, the boys regrouped, rebranded themselves as Wee Johnny Hayes and the Blue Cats, and kept pushing forward, fueled by stubborn belief and youthful confidence. Then came the leap that changed everything. In 1958, the Gibb family boarded a ship bound for Australia, leaving behind familiarity for uncertainty. Fate had a sense of irony. On that same voyage traveled a young Red Simons, another future voice in music history. None of them could have known how much that journey would reshape their lives. Australia offered the fresh start the brothers needed. By 1960, they made their television debut on Strictly for Moderns, performing Time Is Passing By. Even at just 10 years old, Robin's voice cut through the performance. His tremolo, soft, quivering, and strangely adult, felt hauntingly out of place in such a young singer. It was the first hint that something extraordinary was unfolding. Momentum followed quickly. In the mid-1960s, Festival Records signed the brothers, ushering in their first real taste of success. Early hits brought recognition, attention, and the intoxicating promise of fame. They were no longer just talented kids, they were rising stars. Then, in 1965, everything shifted again. When Robin took the lead on I Don't Think It's Funny, listeners noted something unmistakable. This was no longer a child's voice experimenting with melody. It was expressive, fragile, and deeply emotional, the same voice the world would one day mourn decades later. Yet beneath the applause and growing acclaim, tension quietly crept in. Success was arriving faster than anyone could control. Expectations grew heavier. Pressure tightened around three young brothers who were still learning who they were. As the Bee Gees surged towards global fame in the late 1960s, the cracks beneath the surface began to widen. Love, chaos, ambition, and uncertainty collided all at once, especially in Robin Gibb's personal life, where intensity replaced stability. The rise was thrilling. The cost, however, was only just beginning to reveal itself. At just 18 years old, Robin Gibb made a decision that felt sudden, almost impulsive, but it would shape the rest of his life in ways no one could have predicted. In 1968, long before the world fully understood the cost of fame, he married Molly Hullis, the quiet, steady secretary to their manager, Robert Stigwood. There were no flashing cameras or fairy tale illusions binding them together. Instead, their connection was sealed by something far darker: shared survival. Not long after they married, Robin and Molly found themselves caught in the Hither Green rail crash, one of the deadliest train disasters in British history. Nearly 50 people lost their lives, and countless others were left injured or traumatized. Robin and Molly survived. Living through a moment where death felt inevitable forged a bond that, at the time, seemed unbreakable. Trauma has a way of accelerating intimacy, and for a while, it truly felt like they had been given a second chance at life, together.
In the early years, everything appeared to be falling into place. Robin was rising rapidly, becoming one of the most recognizable voices in music. He had fame, a young family, and a future that, at least on the surface, looked stable and secure. But fame is rarely kind, and it almost never arrives without consequences. By the early 1970s, cracks began to show. Robin's career increasingly pulled him across the Atlantic, leaving him based mostly in the United States, while Molly remained in the UK, raising their children, Spencer and Melissa. What started as temporary distance slowly turned into emotional separation. Long stretches apart, missed milestones, and growing misunderstandings began to erode the foundation they had built in fear and survival. Behind the scenes, Robin was struggling in ways fans never saw. The pressure to create, perform, and remain relevant took a heavy toll. Sleepless nights, relentless touring schedules, and creative expectations fed into a growing emotional instability. To cope, he drifted towards stimulants, amphetamine and methadone, substances that were disturbingly common among musicians trying to survive non-stop recording sessions and international tours. At first, they seemed to help him keep going. Over time, they began to unravel him. Friends later described drastic mood swings, bursts of manic energy followed by crushing exhaustion, long nights filled with paranoia, and an increasing sense that people around him, including Molly and even her legal advisors, were plotting against him. Trust dissolved. Communication collapsed. The marriage became another casualty of the life he was living. By 1980, after years of effectively living separate lives, Molly filed for divorce. What followed was not quiet or dignified. Robin violated a court order by speaking publicly about their marriage, a decision that carried serious consequences. In 1983, he was sentenced to 14 days in jail. For a man at the height of international fame, it was a shocking and humiliating moment, one that exposed for the first time just how dark his internal struggles had become. Yet even as his personal world seemed to fall apart, Robin was searching for something new, something that could bring meaning back into his life. In 1985, he married Dwina Gibb, an artist and writer whose spiritual outlook and creative energy resonated deeply with his own. To the public, their relationship appeared calm, intellectual, and deeply supportive. Dwina became both his partner and collaborator, someone who seemed to help steady him after years of chaos. From the outside, their life looked almost idyllic. They split their time between Miami, the Isle of Man, and their historic Oxfordshire home, the Prebendal, two creative souls living quietly away from the glare of the spotlight. But appearances were deceiving. Only after Robin's death did the full truth emerge. Their marriage, far from traditional, had been open, an arrangement the public never suspected during his lifetime. Within that openness lived long whispered rumors, alleged affairs, and unresolved tensions that never fully disappeared. For years, fans could only speculate about what truly happened behind closed doors. Robin Gibb's love life, much like his career, was defined by extremes: deep connection born from trauma, slow emotional erosion under fame, and reinvention layered with secrets. And while the music told one story, the man behind it was fighting battles far more complicated than anyone ever imagined. Around 2001, as Robin Gibb was approaching 50, a quiet relationship had already begun behind the scenes, one that almost no one outside the family truly understood. He had become involved with Claire Yang, a housekeeper in the Gibb household. The relationship stretched on for years, and in 2008, Claire gave birth to Robin's daughter, Snow. To the outside world, it looked like a scandal waiting to explode. But what most people never knew, what completely changed the story, was that Dwina Gibb already knew what was happening and had quietly accepted it. When she later spoke about it, her tone was calm, almost peaceful. She explained that she was not a jealous person and that both Claire and little Snow were properly cared for. With just a few gentle words, she confirmed what fans had whispered about for decades. Yet acceptance did not mean peace. Even with Dwina's understanding, the situation created emotional tension inside the family. Robin found himself trapped between two worlds, trying to hold together two households, stay loyal to his older children, and live with the guilt of a relationship that had slowly slipped far beyond discretion. He wanted harmony in every part of his life, but the harder he chased it, the more complicated everything became. And the emotional storm at home was only one half of his struggle. At the same time, pressure inside the Bee Gees was quietly boiling over. Long before the public ever noticed, tension between Robin and his brother Barry Gibb had been simmering for years, especially over one painful question: who should really be the voice of the group? The rivalry traced all the way back to the success of Massachusetts in 1967. As Barry's voice and creative influence began to dominate, Robin felt himself being pushed further into the background. To him, Barry's growing control felt like a blade pressed slowly against his identity. That frustration finally exploded in 1969 when Robin walked away from Bee Gees altogether. They reunited a year later in 1970, but the wounds never truly healed. Fans heard perfect harmonies. Behind the microphones, the brothers were still clashing over control, over recognition, and over who had the right to be heard. Those unresolved emotions, combined with Robin's increasingly complicated personal life, quietly laid the foundation for the rumors that refused to disappear. Rumors his children would one day finally speak about. Fame, loss, and a family slowly tearing itself apart. The Bee Gees' harmonies were legendary, but behind them lived a family shaped just as much by conflict as by love. The first major fracture came in 1969 when Robin temporarily left the group over creative control. The band survived, but something fragile inside the family was permanently altered. Then came the loss no one could prepare for. In 2003, Maurice Gibb died, Robin's twin brother, and the one person who had always acted as the emotional bridge between Robin and Barry. Maurice's death shattered the delicate balance holding the family together. In the painful days that followed, Barry, already drowning in grief, became furious when he believed that Maurice's widow, Yvonne Gibb, and her relatives were planning a tribute album driven more by profit than by love. He felt excluded, blindsided, and deeply betrayed. The disagreement quickly escalated into a public feud, with Barry openly accusing those around Maurice of exploiting his legacy. And right in the middle of that emotional battlefield stood Robin. He desperately wanted to honor his twin, but the growing hostility between Barry and Yvonne's side made every single step feel impossible. Soon, rumors began to spread that Robin continued working on Bee Gees-related projects, while Barry pulled away, hurt, angry, and disillusioned.
By April 2012, Robin Gibb's body had reached its breaking point. Pneumonia had set in, and he slipped into a coma. Doctors quietly told his family there was nothing more to be done. The room was heavy with grief. Dwina, RJ, and those closest to him gathered, bracing for the inevitable. Then, something no one could have predicted happened.
As Dwina played music from the Titanic Requiem, Robin's fingers twitched. Moments later, his eyes fluttered open. He smiled. Doctors called it a medical anomaly. RJ called it a miracle. For a fleeting few days, Robin returned to them, talking softly, humming melodies, even whispering about returning to the stage. Weakened, fading, but undeterred, he was still consumed by music, still dreaming of performing, still fighting life in the one way he knew how. But the miracle couldn't last. His kidneys failed, his liver faltered, and the illness claimed what little strength remained. On May 20, 2012, at 62, surrounded by Dwina, RJ, and loved ones, Robin slipped away. Dwina recalls it as peaceful, smiling, hand in hers, fearless and full of music until the very end. To his children, that final moment captured who he truly was. Gentle, hopeful, relentless. A man who refused to let pain silence him. For years after Robin's death, the family stayed silent, protecting his privacy. But time revealed new truths. RJ Gibb began speaking publicly, not to sensationalize, but to explain Robin, and what emerged confirmed rumors fans had whispered for decades, exposing a life far more complex than anyone realized. One revelation came directly from Dwina. She and Robin had lived in an open marriage, a truth nearly no one knew. The affair with Claire Yang and the birth of Snow in 2008 weren't betrayals, Dwina explained. Snow was cared for, and the arrangement followed rules the public never understood. Her voice was steady, honest, and without bitterness, finally shedding light on the private life of a man whose public image only told part of the story. Even after Robin Gibb's death, secrets lingered, secrets his family carefully protected for decades. One of the most closely held was the fate of his estate. His will, it turns out, left an estimated £26 million, primarily to Dwina Spencer and Melissa, while RJ Snow, though not named as a main beneficiary, was quietly provided for. The family intentionally kept this private, shielding it from the kind of explosive legal battles that have torn other celebrity families apart. But the real heart of Robin's story wasn't money, it was moments. RJ Snow recalled the final, intimate seconds with his father, holding Robin's head and whispering, "We love you," as he took his last breath. He shared memories of late-night studio sessions from his childhood, watching Robin write music, not out of duty, but because he couldn't imagine life without it. Today, RJ carries on that legacy, performing some of Robin's unpublished works, ensuring his father's creative voice echoes long after his passing. Through their reflections, Robin's children finally reveal what fans have long sensed. Behind the iconic harmonies, the headlines, and the personal struggles, Robin Gibb was a man driven by love, haunted by inner battles, and sustained by music until his very last moments. Their voices now complete the story he never got to tell himself. Robin Gibb's life was a dazzling mix of brilliance and turbulence, and for the first time, his children are unveiling the truths behind the legend.